The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never felt so small. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated seats, but the usual chatter and diplomatic noise was gone. Instead, silence filled the massive chamber, like a heavy blanket. Speaker Veltar stood at the center platform. His blue tentacles shook as he held the latest battle reports. The Aquarian had lived for 300 years and had never seen such defeat. His voice echoed through the hall when he finally spoke. The Vorthon Empire has taken the Kepler system. Our last defense fleet is gone. Admiral Zixtera and 12,000 brave souls died trying to stop them. Gasps and electronic sounds of distress came from the assembled delegates. The Kepler system had been their strongest fortress. If it could fall, nothing could stop the Vorthons now. Council member Narathul from the Silicon Collective raised her crystalline hand. How many systems do we still control, Speaker? Veltar's tentacles drooped lower. 12. Only 12 worlds remain free in this sector of the galaxy. The number hit the Council like a physical blow. Just 6 months ago, they controlled over 200 systems. The Vorton war machine moved faster than anyone thought possible. From his corner seat, Ambassador Yoon Dae watched the panic spread through the chamber. The human representative had only been part of the Galactic Council for 2 years. Most of the other species still treated humans like children who had just learned to walk among the stars. General Crixmore of the Batarian Empire stood up. His 8-foot frame cast shadows across nearby delegates. We must surrender. The Vorthon. Emperor will show mercy if we submit now. Mercy? Speaker Veltar's voice cracked. The Vorthons don't know that word. They turn conquered worlds into slave camps. Their psychic weapons break minds like glass. Then what do you suggest? Crixmore shot back. Our best generals are dead. Our strongest fleets are space dust. The Vorthons have technology we cannot match and warriors we cannot defeat. Old Counselor Nixara from the Crystalline Collective had sat quietly through the debate. At 400 years old, she was one of the wisest beings in the galaxy. Her crystal body caught the chamber lights as she slowly stood. There might be another option, she said. Her voice was soft but carried clearly through the hall. Every eye and sensor turned toward her. Nixara rarely spoke in council meetings, but when she did, others listened. We have been thinking like civilized beings, she continued. We fight wars with honor and rules. We protect civilians and avoid unnecessary death. But the Vorthons do not follow such limits. What are you suggesting? Asked Speaker Veltar. Nixara turned her crystal head toward the human section. Perhaps we need to think like a less civilized species. The humans have an interesting military history. Ambassador Yoon Dae felt every gaze in the chamber focus on him. He had expected this moment would come eventually. Humans were still the newest members of the galactic community, and their reputation was complicated. The human military records show remarkable creativity in warfare, Nixara said. They have survived conflicts that should have destroyed them. They adapt quickly and use tactics that more advanced species never consider. General Crixmore made a sound that might have been laughter. The humans barely have space travel. Their weapons shoot metal bullets. What could they possibly do that we cannot? They have something called Navy SEALs, Nixara replied calmly. The chamber filled with confused electronic chatter. Most species had never heard the term before. Translation computers struggled to make sense of the words. Ambassador Yoon Dae stood up slowly. He was a small man compared to most galactic representatives, but his voice carried confidence. Navy SEALs are special operations soldiers. They handle missions that regular military cannot complete. What kind of missions? Asked Speaker Veltar. Impossible, Buns, Yoon Dae said simply. The chamber fell quiet again. Several delegates exchanged glances that clearly showed doubt. Counselor Thexani of the Void Runners spoke up. With respect to our human friends, this seems like desperation talking. How could primitive soldiers help when our most advanced warriors have failed? Because they think differently, Nixara answered before Yoon Dae could speak. Advanced. Species like ourselves fight wars with logic and technology. We calculate odds and follow established strategies, But humans developed in a dangerous world where logic alone was not enough to survive. She paused, letting her words sink in. They learned to be unpredictable. They learned to use their environment as a weapon. They learned to win fights they should lose. General Crixmore shook his massive head. This is madness, one human soldier against the entire Vorthan Empire. Sometimes madness is the only rational response to an impossible situation, Nixara replied. Speaker Veltar looked around the chamber. Fear filled every face he could see. These were the greatest minds in the galaxy, and they had no solutions left. The Vorthan fleets would reach the remaining free worlds within days. Ambassador Yun Day, he said formally, would your government consider sending military assistance? The human diplomat took a deep breath. I can ask, but I must warn you about something. Navy SEALs are not like regular soldiers. They are trained to operate alone in hostile territory. They complete missions that have no backup plans and no retreat options. What are you trying to tell us? Asked Counselor Thexani. They are very effective at their job, but they are also very dangerous people. If you call for a Navy SEAL, you must be prepared for the consequences. The chamber remained silent for long moments. Finally, Speaker Veltar spoke again. The consequences of doing nothing are extinction. The Vorthans will not stop with our sector. They will consume the entire galaxy eventually. He looked directly at Ambassador Yun Day. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request that Earth send military assistance. We need your most dangerous soldier. Yun Day nodded slowly. I will transmit the request immediately, but I want everyone here to understand something clearly. If Earth sends a Navy SEAL, the rules of this war will change. These soldiers do not fight like civilized beings. They fight to win, no matter what it takes. Good, said Nixara quietly, because the Vorthans certainly do not fight like civilized beings. As the council session ended, representatives filed out with mixed feelings of hope and fear. They had just asked the most violent species they knew to send their most dangerous warrior. In his private chambers, Ambassador Yun Day composed an encrypted message to Earth Command. The words were simple, but carried the weight of galactic civilization. Council requests immediate deployment of single special operations asset. Mission parameters, impossible. Expected survival rate, 0. Galaxy depends on success. Send your best. He transmitted the message and sat back in his chair. Somewhere on Earth, military commanders would read those words and select one person to answer the call. That person would either save the galaxy or die trying. Probably both. The human transport ship looked tiny next to the massive vessels docked at Council Station Alpha. While other species arrived in kilometer-long dreadnoughts covered in energy shields and plasma cannons, the human ship was barely the size of a shuttle. Its plain metal hull had no impressive decorations or threatening weapons visible on the outside. Ambassador Yun Day waited at the main docking bay with a small group of council representatives. 3 days had passed since Earth received their desperate message. The response had been simple. Asset en route. Prepare for arrival. The airlock hissed open and a single figure stepped out. The assembled delegates stared in complete silence. Chief Petty Officer Li Te was not what they expected. He stood just under 6 feet tall with a lean build that looked almost fragile compared to the massive alien warriors around him. His dark hair was cut short and his face showed no expression. He wore simple military clothing in green and brown colors with no visible armor or protection. General Zixmore of the Thrakari Empire let out a sound that might have been laughter. Standing 8 feet tall in powered armor that could stop plasma bolts, he looked down at the human with obvious contempt. This is Earth's most dangerous soldier? He asked loudly. He looks like he would break if I touched him. Li Te turned his head slightly toward the general. His dark eyes studied the alien warrior for a moment without any change in expression. Then he looked away as if the general was not worth his attention. The insult was clear. General Zixmore's armor servos whined as his hands clenched into fists. Ambassador Kang Su stepped forward quickly. She was Li Te's handler, and the only other human present. Honored representatives, allow me to present Chief Petty Officer Li Te of the United States Navy SEALs. He carries no energy weapons, observed Counselor Thexani. Those appear to be projectile firearms. Very primitive. Li Te had a rifle across his back and a pistol on his hip. Both weapons looked simple compared to the advanced energy guns the aliens carried. His other gear consisted of a backpack, some pouches on his belt, and what appeared to be a knife. No armor either, added General Zixmore. One hit from any plasma weapon would kill him instantly. That is why SEALs prefer not to get hit, Ambassador Kang Su said calmly. She pulled out a data pad and handed it to Speaker Veltar. The chief's service record. The speaker took the device and began reading. His tentacles went still as his eyes moved across the information. Other council members gathered around to see. The chamber grew quiet as they read the list of missions and accomplishments. 200 successful operations behind enemy lines, 47 hostage rescues in impossible situations, combat experience on 6 different worlds, expert certification in 23 different fighting methods. But it was the psychological evaluation that made even the most hardened warriors uncomfortable. Terms like exceptionally high stress tolerance, adaptive problem solving under extreme conditions, and capable of violence beyond normal parameters filled the report. This cannot be accurate, said Counselor Narathul. These mission parameters show survival rates below 5%. No one could complete this many impossible tasks. That is why they call them impossible. Li Te spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. Right up until someone makes them possible. General Zixmore stepped closer to the human. You think you are impressive, Softskin? I have killed 1,000 enemies in personal combat. My armor can withstand direct hits from battlecruiser weapons. What makes you think you could succeed where real warriors have failed? Li Te looked up at the towering alien general. His expression remained completely calm. I do not think I am impressive. I know I am effective. There is a difference. Prove it. The general snarled. I do not have time for games, Li Te replied. Where are the files on the Vorthan Empire? Ambassador Kang Su gestured toward a nearby conference room. We have prepared everything the Council could provide about Vorthan military capabilities, base locations, and command structure. The group moved into the conference room where holographic displays showed star maps and intelligence reports. Li Te sat down and began studying the information with complete focus. His eyes moved rapidly across data streams that would take most beings hours to absorb. The Vorthan homeworld of Morthak Prime, explained Speaker Veltar. It has never been successfully attacked. 3 defense fleets patrol the system. Energy shields protect the entire planet. Ground-based weapons can destroy approaching ships from millions of kilometers away. Li Te nodded without looking up from the displays. What about the psychic barriers? Their worst defense, admitted Counselor Nixara. Vorthan psychic weapons can drive most species insane with fear and confusion. Even our bravest warriors become helpless when exposed to their mental attacks. Interesting, Li Te said quietly. He continued reading for several more minutes while the aliens watched him nervously. Finally, he sat back in his chair. I will need a small, fast ship with stealth capabilities. Something that can avoid detection while approaching the Vorthan system. That is impossible, said General Zixmore. Their sensor networks cover thousands of cubic light years around their homeworld. Nothing gets through undetected. Nothing they recognize, Li Te corrected. I will also need detailed information about Vorthan biology, psychology, and social structure. Ambassador Kang Su activated another datapad. Already prepared. We anticipated you would need that information. Li Te took the device and quickly scanned through the files. Good. Their society is built on fear and submission to authority. Their emperor maintains control through psychic domination and displays of power. Yes, said Speaker Veltar. Emperor Vorthak rules through absolute terror. His subjects obey because they are too afraid to resist. Fear can be a weapon, Li Te said. But it can also be a weakness. Counselor Thexani leaned forward. What do you mean? A society built on fear is fragile. Remove the source of fear and the entire structure collapses. Li Te stood up and shouldered his simple backpack. How long until the Vorthans reach the remaining free worlds? 5 days at most, Speaker Veltar replied. Their advance fleets are already moving into position. Then I have 3 days to complete the mission. Li Te walked toward the door. I will need that ship prepared within 2 hours. Wait, called General Zixmore. You cannot seriously believe you can infiltrate the most heavily defended world in the galaxy and somehow defeat their entire empire. Li Te paused at the doorway and looked back. I do not need to defeat their empire, I just need to break it. One man against billions of enemies? The general's voice carried disbelief. One man in the right place at the right time can change everything, Li Te replied. That is what SEALs do. As he left the room, the assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. They had asked for Earth's most dangerous soldier. Now they wondered if they had made a terrible mistake or the best decision in galactic history. Ambassador Kang Su gathered her data pads. I should mention something the chief did not tell you. He has never failed a mission, ever. The weight of those words settled on the council members as they realized the human was already planning something none of them could imagine. Outside, Li Te walked through the station corridors toward the ship bays. His mind was already working, through dozens of variables and possibilities. The galaxy expected him to die trying to save them. He had other plans. The stolen Vorthon scout ship drifted silently through space toward Morthak Prime. Li Te sat in the pilot seat, studying the alien controls that he had learned to operate in just 6 hours. The ship's identity codes had been taken from a Vorthon vessel destroyed in the recent battle at Kepler Station. On the main display, he could see the Vorthon homeworld growing larger. It looked like a black marble covered in red lights. 3 massive defense fleets moved in perfect formations around the planet, their weapons ready to destroy any threat. Li Te activated the communication system and transmitted the captured identity codes. His voice remained calm as he spoke, in the Vorthon language that he had studied during the 3-day journey. Scout vessel Korthmak requesting permission to land. Returning from Patrol Sector 7 with intelligence reports. The response came quickly from the orbital defense station. Scout Korthmak, you are not scheduled to return for 6 more days. Explain your early arrival. Li Te had expected this question. Encountered human fleet movements in outer sectors. Command will want this information immediately. There was a pause. Then the defense station responded. Permission granted. Proceed to landing bay 12 in the capital city. The scout ship descended through the planet's atmosphere. Li Te watched the landscape pass below him. Morthak Prime was covered in massive cities connected by bridges that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Dark oceans filled the spaces between continents and strange purple storms swirled in the upper atmosphere. The capital city appeared ahead. It was enormous, with buildings that reached into the clouds and transportation tubes that carried millions of beings between different levels. At the center stood the central spire, a black tower that rose higher than anything else on the planet. Li Te landed the scout ship in the designated bay. Vorthon ground crews immediately began refueling the vessel while security teams approached to inspect it. He watched them through the viewports, noting their weapons and movement patterns. The Vorthons looked like tall humans, but their skin was gray, and their eyes were completely black. They moved with careful precision, and Li Te could sense the psychic energy that connected them to their commanders. He waited until the security team leader approached the ship before opening the airlock. The Vorthon officer stepped inside and looked around the small cabin. Where is your pilot? The officer asked. Dead, Li Te replied in perfect Vorthon. Human fighters attacked our patrol. I was the only survivor. The officer studied him carefully. Something was wrong, but he could not identify what it was. Li Te looked like a Vorthon thanks to the disguise technology he had brought from Earth. His bio readings appeared normal, and his story seemed believable. Report to intelligence. Center 7 for debriefing, the officer finally said. Command wants to hear about human fleet movements. Li Te nodded and gathered his equipment. Hidden inside his pack were devices that no galactic species had ever seen before. Human technology designed specifically for infiltration and sabotage operations. He left the landing bay and entered the city proper. The streets were filled with Vorthon citizens going about their daily business. They all moved with the same careful precision, their minds connected to the central command network that controlled every aspect of their society. But Li Te was not heading to the intelligence center. Instead, he made his way toward the lower levels of the city. His research had shown him something the Galactic Council did not know about Vorthon society. Their entire command structure depended on bio-neural relay stations scattered throughout the capital. These stations amplified psychic signals and allowed the Emperor to control millions of minds across the planet. Without them, the psychic network would collapse. The lower city levels were flooded with dark water from the planet's underground oceans. Most Vorthons avoided these areas because the water interfered with their psychic connections. It was the perfect place for someone who did not belong to their mental network. Li Te activated the breathing apparatus built into his disguise and dove into the murky water. His SEAL training had prepared him for underwater operations in hostile environments. He moved through flooded tunnels and abandoned passages that had not been used in decades. The first relay station was built into the foundation of a government building. Li Te approached it carefully, using detection equipment to map the security systems around it. Energy barriers protected the station, and armed guards patrolled the area above. But the designers had not considered someone approaching from below, through flooded maintenance tunnels. Li Te placed the first device against the relay station's main processing unit. It was no bigger than his thumb, but it contained technology that would change everything. The device began working immediately, copying and analyzing the psychic network protocols. He moved to the second station, then the third. Each placement required hours of careful infiltration through the underwater passages. The work was exhausting, but Li Te had operated in worse conditions before. By the second day, he had placed devices at 12 different relay stations across the city. The human technology was learning how the Vorthon psychic network operated and preparing to turn it against itself. On the surface, Vorthon security forces had begun searching for the missing scout pilot. They knew someone was in their city who did not belong, but they could not locate him. Their psychic sensors could not detect a human mind that had been trained to resist mental intrusion. Captain Park Min received regular status updates at the human command ship positioned at the edge of Vorthon space. Each message from Li Te was brief and coded, but the meaning was clear. The operation was proceeding according to plan. Package placement at 75% completion. Read the latest transmission. Timer synchronization in progress. Recommend fleet standby for signal. The other members of the Galactic Council monitoring the operation struggled to understand what Li Te was doing. His actions did not match any known military strategy. He should be targeting their weapons, systems or command centers, said General Zixmore. Why is he wasting time with communication equipment? Ambassador Kang Su smiled quietly. He is not targeting their ability to fight. He is targeting their ability to think. On the third day, Li Te began his approach to the central spire. This was the most dangerous part of the mission. The building was protected by every defense system the Vorthons could create. Energy shields, automated weapons, psychic barriers, and thousands of guards made it impossible to enter, at least impossible for anyone thinking like a normal soldier. Li Te did not approach the building from ground level or attempt to fight his way through the defenses. Instead, he used the city's own infrastructure against itself. The central spire drew power from the planet's core, through massive energy conduits that ran deep underground. These conduits were heavily shielded and protected, but they still needed maintenance access points. Li Te followed the power lines through the flooded lower levels until he found what he was looking for, a maintenance shaft that led directly into the spire's foundation. The shaft was filled with deadly radiation and energy discharges that would kill most beings instantly. But SEAL training included operations in radioactive environments. Li Te activated his protective systems and began the climb that would take him directly into the heart of enemy power. Above him, Emperor Vorthak sat on his throne, completely unaware that death was climbing toward him through his own palace walls. The maintenance shaft stretched upward into darkness above Li Te. Energy conduits hummed with deadly power on all sides as he climbed through the central spire's foundation. The radiation levels would have killed most galactic species within minutes, but his protective equipment kept him alive as he moved toward his target. 20 floors above ground level, he reached the access point he needed. Li Te cut through the maintenance panel with a plasma torch and slipped into the building's service corridors. The hallways were empty except for cleaning robots that ignored his presence. He was placing his final device near a major neural relay hub when everything went wrong. A Vorthon maintenance worker rounded the corner and stopped dead when he saw the intruder. For a moment, both figures stared at each other in complete silence. Then the worker opened his mouth to scream an alarm. Li Te moved faster than the alien could react. His hand clamped over the Vorton's mouth while his other arm locked around the creature's neck. The maintenance worker struggled briefly, then went limp, but it was too late. The worker's sudden fear had sent a psychic pulse through the building's neural network. Alarms began blaring throughout the central spire as security systems activated. Red lights flashed in every corridor as automated. Voices announced the breach in the Vorthon language. Intruder alert. Unknown presence detected on level 20. All security teams respond immediately. Li Te dropped the unconscious worker and grabbed his equipment. The final device was only half installed, but there was no time to complete the job properly. He activated its basic functions and hoped it would be enough. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors as Vorthon guards rushed toward his location. Li Te pulled out his rifle and checked his ammunition. 42 rounds remained, not enough for a direct fight against hundreds of enemies. The first squad of guards rounded the corner at full speed. They wore heavy armor and carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. Li Te was already moving when they spotted him. He fired 3 quick shots and dove behind a support pillar as plasma bolts scorched the air where he had been standing. 2 guards dropped with precise headshots while the third scrambled for cover. "Target is human," the surviving guard shouted into his communicator. "Repeat, intruder is human, armed with projectile weapons." More voices filled the communication channels as the news spread. A human had somehow infiltrated the most secure building on their homeworld. It should have been impossible. Li Te moved through the service corridors like a ghost. His military training had taught him to use every advantage the environment offered. He cut power cables to darken sections of hallway, sabotaged elevator systems to slow pursuit, and used maintenance passages that did not appear on standard building maps. The Vorthons had superior numbers and better weapons, but they were fighting on his terms now. Li Te had studied the building's layout during his 3 days of preparation. He knew every possible route and hiding place. A second squad of guards blocked his path toward the stairwell. Li Te activated a smoke grenade and disappeared into the gray cloud. The guards fired blindly into the smoke while he slipped past them through a ventilation duct. Colonel Yun Bin monitored Li Te's vital signs from the human command ship. His heart rate remained steady despite the firefight. His breathing was controlled and regular. The SEAL was operating in his element. "How is he doing this?" asked General Zixmore, who was also watching the telemetry data. "There must be 1,000 Vorthon soldiers hunting him. SEALs are trained for exactly this situation," Colonel Yun Bin replied. "Operating alone behind enemy lines with no support and no retreat option." On the planet's surface, Li Te reached the building's main stairwell. He needed to get higher into the tower where Emperor Vorthak waited, but 20 floors of armed guards stood between him and his target. The stairwell filled with the sound of boots as security teams rushed up from below and down from above. Li Te was trapped between 2 forces with nowhere to run. He activated another device from his pack. This one released a high-frequency sound that interfered with Vorthon neural connections. The guards closest to him stumbled as their psychic coordination was disrupted. Li Te used the confusion to break through their lines. He fired his remaining ammunition with precision that amazed even veteran soldiers. Every shot found its target, and he moved constantly to avoid return fire. But even perfect marksmanship could not overcome infinite enemies. His ammunition ran out as he reached the 30th floor. Li Te dropped the empty rifle and drew his sidearm and combat knife. The pursuit continued up the stairwell. Plasma bolts scorched the walls around him as dozens of guards tried to corner the intruder. Li Te used every trick he knew to stay ahead of them. He rigged improvised booby traps using equipment from his pack. He created diversions that sent guards running in wrong directions. He used the building's own fire suppression system to flood sections with foam that blinded his pursuers. On the 40th floor, Emperor Vorthak himself joined the hunt. The Vorthon leader was 9 feet tall with black armor that pulsed with psychic energy. His elite guard surrounded him as they moved through the corridors. "Find this human," the Emperor commanded. "I want to see what passes for a warrior among these primitive creatures." The psychic aura around Emperor Vorthak was so powerful that most beings could not function in his presence. Fear and despair radiated from him like heat from a fire. His mental abilities could break minds and turn enemies into helpless slaves. But Li Te had trained for psychological warfare his entire career. Navy SEALs learned to operate under extreme mental pressure and resist interrogation techniques designed to break human willpower. When the Emperor's psychic attack hit him, Li Te felt the fear trying to take control of his mind. Images of death and failure flooded his thoughts. But he pushed the mental intrusion aside using meditation techniques that his instructors had drilled into him for years. The Emperor sensed the resistance and smiled coldly. "Interesting. This human has mental discipline. It will make breaking him more enjoyable." Li Te reached the top levels of the central spire with a dozen elite guards close behind him. His equipment was nearly exhausted and his body was showing signs of fatigue, but his mind remained focused on the mission. The throne room doors stood ahead of him, guarded by the Emperor's most trusted warriors. These were not ordinary soldiers, but psychic specialists who could read thoughts and predict actions before enemies made them. Li Te studied the guards through a crack in the door. They stood perfectly still, their black eyes focused on the entrance. Their minds were connected to each other and to their Emperor, creating a defensive network that should have been unbeatable. But human tactics had always been based on doing the unexpected. Li Te smiled grimly as he prepared for the final confrontation that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Li Te stood outside the throne room doors, breathing steadily as he prepared for what came next. His equipment pack was nearly empty, his ammunition was gone, and hundreds of Vorthon soldiers were climbing the stairs behind him. But his mission was almost complete. He activated the final sequence on a small device in his hand. Throughout the capital city, the neural relay stations he had sabotaged over the past 3 days began their work. The human technology had spent hours learning how the Vorthon psychic network operated. Now it was ready to turn that network against itself. The throne room doors opened with a deep rumble. Li Te walked inside to face Emperor Vorthak in his seat of power. The chamber was enormous with black walls that stretched up into darkness. Strange symbols glowed with purple light along the surfaces, and the air hummed with psychic energy. At the center of the room sat a massive throne carved from a single piece of dark crystal. Emperor Vorthak rose from his seat as Li Te entered. The Vorthon ruler was even more impressive in person, standing 9 feet tall in armor that seemed to absorb light. His black eyes held power that had broken the minds of countless enemies. "So," the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "Earth sends a single soldier to challenge an empire that spans half the galaxy. Are all humans this foolish, or are you special?" Li Te stopped in the center of the room, his hands empty, but ready. "I am not here to challenge your empire, Emperor. I am here to destroy it." The Vorthon leader laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "One human against billions of my subjects? You cannot even defeat the guards outside my door." "I do not need to defeat your guards," Li Te replied calmly. "They will defeat themselves." The Emperor's expression changed as he sensed something wrong in the psychic network that connected him to his people. Disturbances were spreading through the neural links, creating confusion and panic among his commanders. "What have you done?" he demanded. Li Te smiled for the first time since arriving on Morthak Prime. "I have given your people something they have never had before: the truth." Throughout the capital city, the modified relay stations began broadcasting, but instead of carrying the Emperor's commands to his subjects, they transmitted something entirely different: video recordings of Vorthon military defeats, audio files of the Emperor admitting his failures to trusted advisors, evidence of corruption and weakness that had been hidden from the population for decades. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Vorthon society was built on the belief that their emperor was infallible and their military was unbeatable. Seeing proof of defeat and deception shattered the mental foundations that held their civilization together. In the space fleets surrounding the planet, Admiral Song Hai watched in amazement as Vorthon warships began shutting down their weapons. Crew members abandoned their posts as the broadcasts reached them. Some ships started firing on each other as different factions emerged. "This is impossible," she reported to the Galactic Council. "The entire Vorthon fleet is falling apart. They are attacking their own forces." Back in the throne room, Emperor Vorthak felt his empire crumbling around him. The psychic network that had given him control over billions of minds was now working against him. His own thoughts were being broadcast to his subjects, showing them his fears and weaknesses. "You do not understand," he snarled at Li Te. "Without my control, the Vorthon Empire will collapse into chaos. Millions will die in civil wars." "Yes," Li Te agreed, "but they will die as free beings making their own choices, not as slaves following your commands." The Emperor raised his hands and psychic energy crackled between his fingers. "Then I will kill you myself and rebuild my empire from the ashes." The mental attack hit Li Te like a physical blow. Images of death and torture flooded his mind, while waves of fear tried to paralyze his body. The Emperor's psychic power was greater than anything he had faced before, but Navy SEAL training included resistance to psychological warfare. Li Te had been broken down and rebuilt dozens of times during his military career. His instructors had taught him that the mind was just another weapon that could be controlled and directed. He stepped forward through the psychic assault, his face showing no emotion. The Emperor increased his attack, pouring more power into the mental barrage. Li Te continued walking toward the throne. "Impossible," the Emperor gasped. "No being can resist my full power." "You are used to fighting civilized species," Li Te said as he drew his combat knife. "Beings who value their sanity and fear death. But humans learn to survive on a world that tried to kill us every day. We are comfortable with violence and chaos." The Emperor abandoned his psychic attacks and drew a weapon of his own. The energy blade hummed with power as he swung it toward Li Te's head. The human ducked under the swing and moved inside the Emperor's reach. His knife found the weak points in the alien's armor with surgical precision. Years of close combat training guided his movements as he fought the most powerful being in the galaxy. The battle was brutal and fast. The Emperor had superior strength and reach, but Li Te had superior skill and experience. He used every dirty trick and illegal technique that military instructors had taught him. When it ended, Emperor Vorthak lay dying on the floor of his own throne room. His black blood pooled around the crystal throne while his psychic network finally went silent. Li Te activated his communication device. "Mission complete. Emperor is down. Extraction requested." The response came from Colonel Hao. "Yun Bin. Extraction en route. Outstanding work, Chief." But Li Te was not finished yet. He walked to the Emperor's communication console and activated the emergency broadcast system. His voice went out to every Vorthon world across the galaxy. "People of the Vorthon Empire, your Emperor is dead. Your fleets are defeated. You are free to choose your own destiny." The effect was immediate. On worlds across the galaxy, Vorthon civilians rose up against their military governors. Colonial subjects declared independence. The vast empire that had threatened to consume all known space began tearing itself apart. Fleet Admiral Song Hai received reports from across the galaxy as the situation developed. Vorthon forces are surrendering everywhere. Some are fighting each other. Most are just abandoning their positions and heading home. The Galactic Council emergency session was called within hours. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what had happened. "One human soldier has accomplished what our combined fleets could not," said Speaker Veltar. "The Vorthon Empire is finished." Ambassador Kang Su stood at the podium to address the assembly. Chief Petty Officer Li Tae represents the finest traditions of human military service. He completed his mission and eliminated the threat to galactic freedom. But how? Asked General Zixmore. How did one soldier destroy an entire empire? He understood something the rest of us missed, replied Counselor Nixara. Empires built on fear and control are fragile. Remove the fear and control, and they collapse from within. 2 days later, Li Tae returned to Council Station Alpha aboard a human transport. The same delegates who had doubted him now looked at him with a mixture of respect and terror. They had asked for Earth's most dangerous soldier, and he had proven exactly how dangerous humans could be. Ambassador Yoon Dae delivered the final message from Earth Command to the assembled council. Chief Petty Officer Li Tae is one of our Navy SEALs. We have 2,500 more operators with similar training and capabilities. The chamber fell completely silent as the implications sank in. The newest member of the Galactic Council possessed a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. We hope, continued Ambassador Yoon Dae, that our continued cooperation will be peaceful and productive for all species involved. As the council session ended, representatives filed out with new respect for the small blue world at the edge of known space. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but they had also demonstrated why it would be very unwise to make enemies of them. Li Tae gathered his equipment and prepared to return to Earth. The mission was complete, the galaxy was safe, and he had orders to report for his next assignment. Somewhere in the vast cosmos, other threats to peace and freedom were probably emerging. When they did, the galaxy now knew exactly who to call.